listener production.
Hi, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. One of Australia's largest and most influential unions is in the headlines this week after alleged links to organised crime and bikie gangs were exposed.
The CFMEU holds a lot of power. They control work sites to some extent. They can press the go slow button on things if they don't get what they want out of governments. And that is terrifying for governments when a union has the power to slow down major infrastructure projects or to take control of them.
It is a huge story. But what exactly is the CFMEU and why is this such a big deal? An explainer on the crisis coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Katrina Blowers. It is Wednesday, July 17.
G'day, guys. Well, we've heard Donald Trump speak for the first time about the attempted assassination against him, but it wasn't necessarily on his terms. A phone call between the former president and presidential candidate RFK Jr. was leaked.
It felt like a giant, like the world's largest mosquito, and we're going to win. We're going to win. We're way ahead of the guy.
So, for context, RFK Jr. is an independent politician in the US who is attempting to run in November. He's been pretty outspoken about both Trump and Joe Biden, and yes, he is a descendant of JFK. RFK Jr.'s son leaked the phone call. RFK has apologised. Meantime, details about what the man who tried to assassinate Donald Trump did in his final days have been revealed. 20-year-old Thomas Crooks attended a gun range in his hometown of Pittsburgh, bought a ladder and 50 rounds of ammunition. Now, this is according to CNN. But despite now having access to Crooks's phone and computer, detectives are reportedly still struggling to narrow down his motive. This comes after Donald Trump's triumphant appearance at the Republican National Convention. He appeared yesterday with a giant bandage on his ear.
He is here tonight to show his courage, his defiance against somebody who tried to kill him. You will not take this man down. He has the courage, the strength, and he will be the next president of the United States.
Oh, you got to hand it to the Americans. They sure do know how to make theatre and showbiz at these events. Now, Trump didn't speak, Sasha. That's expected to happen on the final day of the convention, which will be Friday, our time. Just an update, though, from Trump's campaign office. Just in the last few minutes, actually, it's been revealed that Trump and Vance will hold their first campaign rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan on Saturday. Now, this will mark their very first rally together and the very first one after Trump's assassination attempt. It's going to take place in an indoor venue, we're being told.
Yeah, because there were questions about this is Trump's MO, is those big open-air rallies where lots of people can get in and cheer and chant and hear Donald Trump speak. So the fact that it's been moved inside isn't really a surprise. Look, something else that's been kind of ticking away in the background that I think we've probably all forgotten in the wake of this attempted assassination. Now, remember very clearly just a week ago we were talking about but probably when Joe Biden was going to be standing down as the nominee for the Democrats. But that's all obviously just kind of completely halted in the wake of what happened to Trump. But there are reports today that private efforts to boot Biden are continuing behind the scenes within the Democratic Party. The president also came out yesterday to defend comments that he made about Trump. You've probably seen that there has been a lot of talk about how the rhetoric of how the media and politicians refer to Trump, that he's a threat to democracy and that he's an authoritarian and that he's dangerous. That is the rhetoric that inspired the shooter. Obviously, that is just conspiracy, but that's the commentary that's kind of come out from certain sides of politics. And Biden did use a comment where he said that we need to put him in the bullseye. Now, Biden defended those comments yesterday, but he did admit that they were a mistake, but that he didn't mean that violence or harm should come to the former president. So there's still, Joe Biden having to kind of give these explanations to things he said is not going to help his case. It feels like it's all Trump's kind of got luck on his side at the moment with this campaign. Everything is kind of going well for him, whereas Joe Biden, while public talk of him stepping down has died down, it is still happening behind the scenes. There are reports the man who allegedly killed 2 Australians in a hotel room in the Philippines has handed himself in. David Fisk, Luchita Cortez and her daughter-in-law Mary Jane Cortez were found dead a week ago at a luxury resort in Tagaytay, south of Manila. CCTV footage showed a man leaving and re-entering their room. It is believed he first gained access through a window. A manhunt was launched after their bodies were found. It is still not clear what the motive behind their deaths was. Now, we don't know much about this suspect, except that according to the town's police chief, he has surrendered, and more will be revealed at a press conference today.
Yeah, interestingly, the mayor in that Filipino district had threatened to sack the police chief if they didn't come up with a suspect within, I think it was 7 days. So very interesting to see what they will reveal at this press conference today.
And we played the first thing that came to our heads, just so happened to be the best song in the world.
Jack Black's rock duo Tenacious D has cancelled the rest of their Australian tour after bandmate Kyle Gass made comments on stage about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump.
Don't miss Trump next time.
Oh yeah, if you had trouble making that out, it was "Don't miss Trump next time," and that's what he said when he was asked whether he had a wish for his birthday. So he said that at their Sydney show. Jack Black, who is Gass's brother, has released a statement saying he was blindsided by Gass's comment and would never condone hate speech or encourage political violence in any form. He says he no longer feels it's appropriate to continue the Tenacious D tour and all future creative plans are on hold. Now, this does seem like a pretty drastic move. It would have been fascinating to be a fly on the wall during those meetings where they were deciding whether to do this or not. Apparently people were queuing up for the Newcastle show and had to be told to go home. But it is worth noting that, you know, celebrities have been cancelled for making comments against Donald Trump in the past, Sasha. Kathy Griffin, a comedian, back in 2017, she was kind of cancelled and really her career took a major setback when she posed for a photo holding a severed head Halloween mask of Trump. Trump was then president, and it was doused in ketchup to make it look like blood. So, yeah, a big pity, I guess, for a lot of Tenacious D's fans in Australia.
I think it's surprising that they've made such a cutthroat move to go, no, the whole tour's off. We're not proceeding with it, at least for the time being. But there has been a lot of criticism of these comments, which I think is probably understandable. But one criticism went quite far. Ralph Babbitt, he's an Australian senator, rather. He wants Anthony Albanese to deport them, which I think is probably a little bit over the top. And, you know, it's worth noting he's quite a right-wing commentator, this senator, and it just feels like it's that attitude of, you know, free speech is only okay when I'm saying what I want to say rather than what anyone else wants to say. But no doubt that, yeah, those comments were in pretty poor taste, and Tenacious D is paying the price now by having to cancel their show. Katrina, thank you so much for being here for the headlines. Next up, you've probably heard the word CFMEU bandied about in the media the last couple of days. We're going to explain to you why it matters and why you should care.
What we have seen here in recent days isn't unionism, it's thuggish, unacceptable behaviour at its worst that I have zero tolerance for and has absolutely no place on any Victorian worksite.
That was Victoria's Premier Jacinta Allen reacting to the explosive news out of the Victorian branch of the CFMEU this week. An investigation by 60 Minutes and 9 newspapers has exposed allegations underworld criminals and bikie bosses were being parachuted into lucrative roles within the union. The fallout has been immediate and massive. The CFMEU National Office has placed the Victorian branch into administration, promising an investigation. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has since said the former union boss's alleged behaviour should be condemned, isolated and stamped out, while the Victorian Premier has written to the police and the Anti-Corruption Commission to investigate any criminal links. So, why is this such a big deal? And what will the flow-on effects be for the industry and unions in Australia? Here to break it all down for us is Sharnelle Vella, Channel 7 state political reporter in Victoria. Sharnelle, welcome to the briefing. Let's backtrack a second. This is a huge story, but can we start from the beginning? What exactly is the CFMEU?
The CFMEU is a large construction union, one of, not the biggest in the country, but one of the biggest unions. And they represent a whole lot of workers that work on all sorts of trade sites, manufacturing sites. And what people, I guess, would have seen about this union or maybe kind of know about the union is that they are really outspoken. They come out and you know, those mass rallies are the ones that the CFMEU holds, and they don't hold back when they're angry about something, when their rights are taken away from workers. And they do a lot of good work in advocating for workers, making sure they are kept safe on sites. But there is also, and has been for some time, a bit of a murky side to them where they have been accused of bullying behaviour, of standover tactics, and of being, you know, a little bit scary on building sites if things don't go their way, if they don't have people signed up to the right EBAs. So there is good to them, but there is also a darker side that we do see every now and then.
And how important is it in the national union picture? Where does it sit in the hierarchy?
So when it comes to the CFMEU and the Labor Party, we know that they have had an ongoing relationship for a really long time. To put that in perspective for you, a quarter of all donations to the Labor Party come from the CFMEU, and that equates to millions of dollars that are collected by the CFMEU and handed in political donations to the Labor Party. So that relationship between them is very important. Some would say that is why the Labor Party is seen to be protecting them at times, not wanting to speak out against them, because their donations are so important.
And how is it structured? So this story that we're going to get to in a minute that's come out this week focuses on the Victorian branch. So does each state have its own branch and it's run by a national office?
Yeah, so the Victorian branch actually looks after Tasmania and South Australia, but then there is a national office that overlooks these unions, but they do run really individually. So if you imagine exactly how our government runs, there is an overarching federal government and then states are allowed to make their own decisions. Not everything is controlled at a national level.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So you touched on it a bit there in your previous answer in terms of the role it plays in politics. Are there examples of how we've seen the CFMEU work to get its agenda onto the national political stage and push its policies?
Yeah, so I think you see that in workers' rights. You see them being outspoken when it comes to their enterprise bargaining agreement, so basically their pay deals and how they influence things there. There has for a long time, I guess, been questions about how much influence the unions have, especially over a Labor government, and if that is creeping into areas that it shouldn't. So in a national level, the CFMEU holds a lot of power. They control work sites to some extent. They can press the go slow button on things if they don't get what they want out of governments. And that is terrifying for governments when a union has the power to slow down major infrastructure projects or to take control of them. So at a national level, the federal government and the state governments want to keep unions on side. They know that the members of those unions are large groups of people who are, you know, predominantly blue-collar workers who are out on trade sites, and that really is the heartland for the Labor government. So they want to make sure that they're doing everything they can to make sure that the union is happy. So that has also been a precarious relationship between the Labor government and the CFMEU that has been questioned for a very long time.
All right, so we've gotten an understanding of what the CFMEU is and how it's come to be as big and as important as it is. Let's talk about this recent investigation. What did it uncover?
Yeah, so this was done by Nick McKenzie for 60 Minutes and The Age. And what he's uncovered is really rumours that have been flying around for some time, that people, especially in Victoria, have always said, we think something's going on with the CFMEU. And what he's uncovered is basically bikies within the ranks of the CFMEU using their positions in outlaw motorcycle gangs to intimidate. He's also uncovered allegations against John Setka. He was the Victorian president of the CFMEU, allegedly intimidating another union official. There's also kickbacks for contracts, which basically means what he uncovered was a union official having a meeting with someone who wanted to gain a contract, a building contract with the Victorian government on what we call here the Big Build. The Big Build basically overlooks every major project that's happening in Victoria. So whether that be a new freeway, a new rail line, that is the Big Build. And basically this union delegate has said to that builder, if you want to get on government sites, you need to come through us. And using some murky language, has in a roundabout way inferred that you need to pay us to get onto that site, and you don't get onto that site unless you go through us, which is a really damning allegation, not just against the union, but for the Victorian state government as well.
What's the response been from the state government?
Well, to be honest, it was slow. These allegations began on Friday when John Setka resigned. Now, when he resigned, he did an interview with myself, and I said to him, what are you trying to get ahead of? It seems like something's on the horizon that you're worried about. He wouldn't go into the allegations. So that was the first moment we knew something was coming, when he said, I'm resigning to get ahead of malicious allegations. He strenuously denies all of them. Then we started seeing the drip feeding of what was coming, what was all leading up to the 60 Minutes story that aired on Sunday night. And we didn't hear from the Premier. And that is probably a bit damaging for her, that she didn't come out earlier and get on top of it. She announced quite a few steps that she believes will help in this situation. So she has written to the National Executive and asked that the relationship basically between the CFMEU and the Victorian Labor Party be suspended. So that means that she's keeping them at arm's length for the moment. While that suspension is in place, she said there'll be no political donations accepted from the CFMEU by the Victorian Labor government. Another significant step. She also wants to see anti-bikie laws strengthened. So basically that would mean you wouldn't see anyone with a gang affiliation to a motorcycle group on a Victorian site, but that really needs to be clarified. So some significant steps, but is it enough? It's yet to be seen.
So what could the flow-on effects be then for workers who are part of the CFMEU in Victoria? I mean, you talked about the polarity of the great work that unions do, but also in this instance, allegations that are extremely serious. Can it flow on and hurt workers who are on job sites in Victoria?
Yeah, absolutely. So for workers, this puts them really in a grey zone for a couple of reasons. Something else that the Premier discussed was the state government working with the federal government to review all EBAs. Now, people may or may not remember that just recently the CFMEU signed off on a 20% pay rise for all of its workers. Now, that will be looked at, and that means that if it is found that that deal for that EBA had anything untoward involved in it, it could be torn up. Now, that's going to affect every worker that is a part of the union. The other part of this is, as an announcement from the CFMEU, they have had their Victorian branch placed into administration, and the national branch is taking over. What does that mean? It means basically that the national branch has acknowledged that there's something going on in the Victorian branch that it needs to look at, and it will investigate it itself. Now, the CFMEU was asked, is that acceptable to have the CFMEU investigating the CFMEU? Does it need to be more independent than that? They believe it doesn't. They don't want a royal commission. They say calls for a royal commission are over the top at the moment. They're more than capable of cleaning house themselves, and that they're going to try and do that.
Is there any sort of suggestion or belief or, steps to look into the national branch? Has this infiltrated, or even other unions? I mean, is this something that could be widespread that police and the state government are considering looking into?
Look, we've seen other unions come out in the last couple of days and say that they welcome these moves and that the CFMEU really does need to be accountable. In the past, we've seen other unions come out and say they've felt the bullying and intimidation from the CFMEU against their own workers. So I think most unions would really welcome this. I think as far as something bigger happening, in my opinion, I think that there does need to be something bigger. I think the CFMEU can't investigate itself and then come out and tell us that everything is okay when you've had allegations that are as startling as this. I think there does need to be something bigger, whether that's a royal commission or an independent inquiry. We know that these matters in Victoria have been referred to Victoria Police and to IBAC. That's basically our corruption watchdog. And so it will really be up to them now to decide, A, has any criminality occurred? Does that equate to a criminal charge against anyone? And if not, what else needs to be done to ensure that our unions are acting appropriately and that workers are fairly represented?
Sharnelle, thank you so much for taking us across that story. It's a big one. It has big implications and we'll be watching it closely. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
That was Sharnelle Vella, Channel 7 state political reporter in Victoria. And just a quick update to this story. The federal government is expected to appoint an independent administrator to overhaul the CFMEU today. Employment Minister Tony Burke signalled yesterday that the union's response to these allegations does not go far enough. And that is all we have time for this morning. Thank you for listening. We'll be back in your feeds this Savo at 3. In the meantime, why not check out our other content? We publish full videos of our weekend briefing eps on YouTube. Search Listener Newsroom. Be sure to subscribe as well. I'm Sasha Barbagat. Catch you next time.
Listener.